This is Karen with newclevelandradio.net. It is time for Avoid the Maze, your journey through life. And you're going to find out today, as you probably have in previous episodes, is that we all have so much in common. We are not the only ones walking around with that proverbial dark cloud over our heads. We all can get stuck in the maze. But like my guest today, Carolyn, you found a way to get out of the maze. And it sounds like you were stuck there for a while. And it doesn't make any difference what the reason is that you got there, but you
Hmm.
got there, and at some point you finally said, enough. I
Yeah.
don't want to be here anymore.
Yeah.
So tell my listeners a little bit about your backstory.
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me and it's so nice to talk with you. My name is Caroline Holke. I am a life coach. I have a background and actually I was in corporate marketing for a couple decades. I was in global marketing and I traveled all over the world. And the reason that I bring that into play is because marketing actually is a lot about human behavior. And so I think that, and leading teams as in that role, influencing, helping to like influence people and all that stuff. My transition into a coach was kind of a little, when we look at kind of the core pieces, it
Sure.
becomes a little more natural. Okay, so a little bit about my story. I grew up in a family that everybody drank. That was just kind of like how it went. And, as a teenager, you look at the adults and like, oh, that's what grown-ups do, right? And so I think that I don't know that that's atypical. I think that's probably pretty typical, actually. And that continued along throughout, getting out of college, starting my career, graduate school, all that stuff. Um, and there was a point at which I had dealt with some family, we had a death on the family. My brother died by suicide. And it was a little more, and I think this is typical or not atypical. Um, I found that I was just drinking a little bit more than I wanted to be drinking. And how that showed up was, it wasn't anything super dramatic. But how it showed up for me was that I felt a little groggy in the morning and I would make bad food choices, like love the greasy hamburger or the French fries or whatever it was. And then, would just find that I was kind of dragging through the day. And then I would say, well, damn, I deserve that glass of wine because my day has been so bad. And my day's been so bad because the wine I drank the night before, right? It becomes very cyclical there. Um, and there was just a point at which I said, I know I can do better. I know I want more. I want to feel better. I want to be able to do more things, engage more, all that kind of stuff. And this is at a point where I met a coach who was talking about stopping over drinking. And I said, ding, ding, ding. That's what I want.
I love that. I love that.
Yeah, because I think that, my brother actually had been in AA. So I was very familiar with the abstinence model, knew all about that. Um, but I had never heard about the non-abstinence model, the figuring out what's going on. And I think that having studied this, there's a lot of discussion nowadays. There are probably many camps, but there are big discussions regarding whether it's the disease model or the choice model. And the idea that it's a choice and I don't have to like go down the path of saying I'm a label and blah, 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 which never resonated for me. In fact, most of the people everybody in my life was like, why in the hell are you doing this? So I kind of kept it quiet for a while and pretended like it was a diet and all that kind of stuff. I still get people that are like, I don't understand why you would quit
Sure.
drinking. I'm
Yeah.
like, well,
You know, it's funny because we all grow up in different environments. And because we're individuals, we take on certain aspects or we don't take on those aspects. Um, my parents were social drinkers. There wasn't a lot of drinking in the house, but there was at times. And I just knew that was for adults and for social occasions. Um, Yet I had friends whose parents, you would see them all the time with a glass of wine, a bottle of beer, coming home making a martini. And I didn't think anything of that either. It
Mhm.
was like, okay. So I grew up not caring if I had a drink or not, but realizing from friends like yourself that maybe we're taking on too much.
Mm.
Okay.
Yeah.
And yet I hadn't experienced it. So for many years, I just sat back, never said a word. And it's only recently I don't judge, but I start asking the questions like you probably do as a coach. Okay. How is this working for you? And you made a big statement that you realized it wasn't working for you because you needed a drink because the last one didn't really make you feel so good, but maybe this one will make you feel a little bit better.
Yeah, yeah, it's that cycle of I feel kind of crummy from today. I deserve some relief. Oh, by the way, I felt crummy today from the night before, right? Like it's self-fulfilling for sure, for sure.
Exactly. So,
And people do that. We talk about there's a lot of stigma associated with drinking, a lot of stigma. And so a lot of times I like to pull back and say, people do this with eating. It's emotional eating. People do it
right,
with shopping, retail therapy. Like there are a million different things that we do this with, and we're like, I just need a little, I need a little break, whatever it is. And I love to come back to this idea of you're like human beings have choice, absolutely. Grown adults, we get to decide what we want to do. But when we think about it, do you want a break from your life? Or do you want to have the presence of mind to figure out what's going on in your life in order to kind of start to fix that?
exactly. And some of us don't want to know what's going on in our
Yeah.
life because
Yeah.
that's scary. Okay.
Right. Right.
And so again, all these different things that you talked about, um, and it now make resonates in my head. My mother was one of those eaters. Okay.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, she'd have a bad day at work and she'd stop at the grocery store on the way home and she'd get a fresh bread. And the first thing she would do when she walked in the house was start eating it.
Right.
And my father would say to her, "But you're making dinner. Why are you eating the bread?"
Hmm.
And she never had a good answer other than, "I'm hungry." And then 6 months down the line, she looked in the mirror and she said, "Oh my God, I
Yeah.
can't do this." Went on one of those crash diets, lost the weight, but still wasn't feeling good about
Yeah.
something. So
Yeah.
what'd she do? She ate again.
Right.
And those were the things that I remembered growing up. I did not want to do those things.
Hmm.
And I have because they're inbred. Okay.
Mm.
But when you have choices, that's when you do look in the mirror and you say, okay, I do have choices.
Yeah.
Do I want to make those choices?
Right. Right. Right.
So, how easy or hard was it for you to start making the choice that, hey, I'm going to listen to this coach because this coach is saying something that resonates?
Yeah, yeah. No, for me, it was, I'm very analytical. So it was having a framework, having kind of the plan, all that stuff. That was really helpful. And I will say for everybody going through any kind of change in the beginning, we're super motivated. And then our primitive brain comes back online, our survival brain that really just wants to keep us safe and conserve energy and seek pleasure. That part pops in and was like, wait a minute, she might be serious here. And so that's totally normal. I love telling that to my clients, and I tell them that at the beginning, I tell them that all throughout, and they always forget. And then sometimes they're like, oh, this is what you were talking about. I'm like, yeah, you're doing it right. Like, it sucks, but that's okay. Just like I like that feeling after I go to the gym and I lift weights, and the next day I feel like I'm not miserable, but I feel a little sore. Like, oh, that did something. When that resistance kicks in, that means
Like,
something's happening, something's changing.
exactly. And change is not easy to do it totally on your own
Hmm.
because we can sort of convince ourselves, well, it's okay.
Hmm.
I'm not doing it today.
Hmm.
It's okay. I had the extra piece of cake. I had an extra drink. I chose not to exercise. I know that I've been exercising now almost 100% for the last year. But occasionally I take those days off, like I did on Sunday. And on Monday, I was so cruel to myself. It was like, you better get on the bike and ride it. You better go to the pool and do your walking. And on Monday, I overdid it to the point that yesterday I had taken the day off to be with my husband and I hurt. I
Hmm.
just hurt all over.
Hmm.
And it didn't realize it till the end of the day. This is why I'm hurting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just because I took a day off doesn't mean I have to double down the next day,
Right.
but I did.
Yeah.
And so that's where you're talking about that survival brain comes in and says, hey, you know, if you want to keep losing the weight, you better make up for what you missed. But the
Right.
reality is we can take that day off. We
Yeah, it
can,
should. And should. And this is a beautiful moment. It's a very tender moment to start showing some self-compassion,
yes.
which I believe is really at the core of it. It is scary to start listening to ourselves, to start paying attention to ourselves when we're in a society that's constantly saying, go, 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 do. Once you achieve this, then everything's going to fall into place.
And if we keep waiting,
Yeah,
it's not
yeah.
going to fall into place.
No, yeah. So we have to enjoy the journey while we're getting there. And it for me, I work with type A high performing women in corporate, wherever, but type A high performers who like to be perfectionists. And it's counterintuitive because the things that have gotten them promoted are the things that are gonna drive them to eat the bag of Oreos or have another glass of wine or have those screw it moments. Maybe.
Exactly. You know, it's funny that you should say that because I was working for a corporate for-profit college and I loved what I did. Absolutely did. Hated the culture. The culture was really killing me. But in the beginning, before the culture was killing me, I had lost a lot of weight. I was very into doing all the right things for myself because I wanted to do the right things for my students. And so, because of that, I was on par. And I was offered a promotion to a different campus. I thought, oh, this is wonderful. This is what I've been waiting for. And
Mhm.
I got there, and the culture just like was stripping me of everything I was doing. But
Mm.
instead, I kept putting in more time because I wanted to prove to myself. And after a little over a year, my son, who was going to school there, walked into my office, closed the door, and said, Mom, you got to get over your depression. And
Mm.
with that, I just started crying. It
Yeah.
was like,
Yeah.
where did this come from?
Right.
And we were driving home that night, and he said to me, you can't work here anymore. I said, but what about my students? I
Mm.
love what I'm doing. And he goes, you may say that. He said, but you're miserable.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I walked in the house that night. My husband saw my tear stained face and he goes, what's wrong? And I said, I have to take a medical break from work. And he goes, okay, are you sick? And my son just looked at him. He said, you know, she is.
Mm. Mhm.
And I went back into work. I went to see the doctor the next day. I had a medical excuse. I walked into work, gave them the excuse. They said, okay, you have 6 weeks. I thought, okay, it's going to give me time to clear my head.
Mhm.
Either I'm going to return or I'm going to quit.
Mhm.
Except they fired me 2 days later.
Oh,
And emotionally, that got to me to the point where I went down the rabbit hole, but I don't like being down there.
mm,
And so I went back to the doctor and said, what can we do?
mhm.
He said, well, first of all, you have to admit, are you depressed or not? And it took me almost a month to admit it. And once I
Mm,
did,
mhm,
that's when I started to grow.
mhm,
That's when I
mhm.
could look around and go, as much as I want to go back, it's not the place for me.
Right,
And
right.
I understand that drive that women have, because once you get that ability to grow,
Mhm.
you think what you have to do is keep working harder and harder.
Mhm.
We forget about ourselves. So, how do you convince your clients that, hey, you can keep fighting the system, but you know what? Until you take care of the system inside.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So the way that I look at that is first acknowledging that again, and I'll say it simple is similar to that. It's like the things that have gotten you promoted are the things that are gonna bite you in the butt when you're trying to drink less, when you're trying to lose weight, when you're trying to make any sort of personal change like that, because that self-compassion piece is so important. And most of the time when you're talking to high powered or driven people, they're like, nope, I don't want to be I have high standards. I have high standards. I don't want to lose my high standards. You're laughing because this
Yeah,
is
I get
resonating,
it.
isn't it? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. 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 So just let's do an experiment. How does it feel? And maybe you could even go into what happened for you on Monday morning when you woke up. What was your experience after having missed your workout on Sunday? What was your self-talk like?
My self-talk was that, you've gained weight again.
Mhm.
Um, your skin is not glowing like it normally does. I just don't want to do what I have to do today.
Right. Right.
But then pushed myself through it. And
Mhm.
I will tell you that the strangest part of it all was I put on an outfit which I have not worn probably in 4 years. It was big on me,
Mm, mhm,
but I
mhm.
didn't realize it till the end of the day.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So when we start to notice that self-talk in the moment, it's pretty negative. I call it drill Sergeant Savage. Like he's in there banging the
Yep.
two trash can lids, metal trash can lids together. Like, let's get going. Um, and it feels really self-defeating. So some people will actually take that and just say, screw it, I'm going to go sit on the couch and then they'll get into that cycle. You called it the rabbit hole. They'll
Right.
get into that cycle and it'll take them quite a while to get out of it. Now, the other way to look at that is if we look at that with a lot of self-compassion and we look at what happened with curiosity and with compassion and with tenderness, it's like, I took the day off to be with my husband. That's actually really lovely. I like my reasons. And if I pull back and think about one day within the scope of however many days, it's a rounding error, if that, right?
Exactly.
And just notice the feeling within you when the self-talk is like that. What happens for you?
It takes the pressure off my shoulders. It's,
Right,
you know,
right.
as I learned in a class I was taking, you know, we walk around with this backpack on all the time.
Mm-hmm.
But at that moment, you can take those bricks out of the backpack, and all of a
Right.
sudden it's so much lighter.
Yeah,
And so
yeah.
you feel like you can do just about anything you want to do.
so important, because then what are you motivated to do? What are you likely to do when you're feeling a little bit lighter, a little bit more open? What are you more likely to do?
Take care of myself.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And that's why it's important. It's not navel gazing. It's not like ooey gooey woo woo, anything like that. I'm very practical. I'm very practical. Give me a spreadsheet, whatever. I love it. All the whole thing. Okay. So and I love it when people are like, no, I don't have time for that. I have high standards. Blah, 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 blah. Love it. Me too. Get it. Totally get it. Been there. I've tried everything. Swear. But when we start settling into that, what's really important is how you are feeling. And our self-talk has so much to do with that. So noticing that the high standards, the drill sergeant savage, that whole spiel, sometimes it'll work, but a lot of times it doesn't. But that self-compassion piece, really, I've never seen it not work. Okay, I'm sure there's instances, but whatever.
But don't you think as women, and I'm sure there are men out there too, so my men listeners, please don't take this personally, but I think as women, we think we have to keep doing and doing, whether it's for our children, a spouse, another family member, the neighbor next door, our clients in business. I just contacted somebody the other day who's been wanting to be a guest on the show, and I can't fit them into my schedule. I just can't. Now, a year ago, I would have just dropped everything and found a place, but I wasn't doing the best job I could do. And I realized that. And so I had to make the decision. These are my hours. This is what I can do. I may want you, you may want to be on here, but you know what? I just can't do it. So I had to say no.
Yeah, I think that, well, first of all, congratulate you on your growth there. That's so important. No is a complete sentence. Okay, big discussion, but women are socialized to be caregivers. That doesn't necessarily mean there's anything in our hormones. And I know people can debate this, whatever, but we are socialized to be caregivers.
Right.
And if you think about that, that's reinforced when we're little people. It's you're such a good helper, that you're such a good girl, blah, 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 all those things that becomes self-fulfilling. That's a feedback loop that we internalize, right? Ultimately, so much of my work is helping people understand their actual feelings. Over drinking and overeating or over shopping or over anything is an underfeeling problem. Okay. So same thing applies with other people. I need other people. That's like an external validation piece, right? Because we're not getting it from ourselves. We're not feeling enough within ourselves. We're not feeding ourselves, providing our own needs. And when we get the validation, and validation doesn't need to be like, you look fantastic. It can just be like, oh, you're a nice person. When we are constantly trying to get that from an external source, it dries up really quickly. And by the way, we don't believe it all the time. Right? People will give us compliments and we're like, oh, this dress, it was on sale or whatever, right? Like we brush those off. We don't really believe it because there's nothing inside for that to stick to. And that's why that's so important. Now, there are women that are able to do that for sure. And there are men that really look for external validation as well. So that's not, it's across the board, but I agree with the premise that women are socialized to be more externally focused. And that's why it's so important to start generating that from within, to start paying attention to our emotions. Because when we're ignoring ourselves, that it doesn't matter what kind of self-care you're doing outside of it, all those different actions. If you're continuing to ignore yourself and your experience, there's no foundation.
Exactly. Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think this discussion is so important as I go into my newest podcast, which is called Avoid the Maze, You Are Special. And it's specifically, I take that back. My aim is to help mothers who are very dedicated to taking care of their children for whatever their special needs are. It could be learning disabilities, it could be advanced abilities. It doesn't make any difference. But I know as a mother, I put so much energy into my kids that I lost myself. And my husband did the same thing. Okay. We realized when our sons graduated that guess what? We didn't really have any real friends. Everything was centered around them. And yes, we had our careers. So we were building our career. We were taking care of our kids.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden, it's like, what's there for me?
Who am I? Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I chose after 2 years of doing Avoid the Maze that I'm going to now have a secondary one because I think it's so important for these women and fathers out there too to say, wait a second. I know I go to all the football games and the basketball games and the dance recitals and all that, but I got to do something for me.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And it doesn't always have to be, all together. It can be separate. And I have found recently, even taking a 5 to 10 minute break can make a huge difference in how I react and how much I like myself.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that what you're describing is so very common. That's why we hear about everybody being concerned about being early, empty nesters and that whole thing. Yeah. That's a wonderful venture that you're getting ready to embark on. And I have actually started a group program for women who have already stopped over drinking. And so it's called Uncorking Your Life After Over Drinking. And that's where we start to, because figuring out your relationship with drinking is just like the tip of the iceberg, right? That is just the beginning to all the things that you can do now that you've got, first of all, you realize I just did something that I thought was impossible. Go me.
Absolutely.
What else is there? What else am I thinking is impossible? Right? It's kind of exciting. And so we go through a bunch of different, like a hero's journey, essentially, of figuring out, relationships with how what we're thinking about our limiting beliefs. How are they holding us back? What can we do instead? Emotions. Emotions are always a big one for me. Again, not because that's like my that's where I go to, or I would go to previously, but I figured out that like the straightest path between two things is, the fastest way to get there is just to deal with our emotions, rather than if we think about all the coping mechanisms that we create in order to avoid them. Those are generally more detrimental than just feeling our feelings and learning how to do that. Processing emotions.
So how can my listeners find you and, get the advantage of your expertise, because there are so many women out there. And I happen to have a couple of friends who keep saying to me, but I just need this one more drink to get through the day. I just need this one more. And because I'm not a drinker, I say to them, I can't tell you, if you should or you shouldn't, because for me, there's no validation.
Right.
But I know how I've given up other things that have not been good for me. But so many of these friends and acquaintances would be wonderful candidates for
Yeah.
someone like you.
Yeah. So I'm on social media on Facebook or Instagram, Caroline Holke Coaching. And then my website is the same, carolineholkecoaching.com. I do have a free stop over drinking course that's delivered via email. So it's not like you have to show up, and you can remain anonymous and all that kind of good stuff. Um, and so that's available on my website. And then again, for those people that have already kind of figured out their drinking and are wondering what's next, I do have a group program that I run every 6 months, and just an intimate group of women, and it's been really effective. It's been really fun too. So
And for those of you who are out there listening to this, sometimes, we think of group coaching as being, I just don't want to expose myself. But I will tell everyone that I've been through 2 different group coaching programs in the last 3 years. I have connected with some wonderful people who have become my long-term friends.
yeah.
And I couldn't have made the changes without being in the group.
Yeah.
And if
Yeah.
I had just done it one-on-one, I think I would have done fine, but not as great as I am, because when I start to slip, I know that I can reach out and just
Yeah.
put those feelings out there,
Mhm.
and I'm not going to get judged, but I'm going to be asked the hard questions,
It helps you kind of do that pause.
Yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
absolutely.
So,
Absolutely. I'm glad you brought that up, because I'm a big fan of both one-on-one and group. So my group component is, we basically meet for the first 3 weeks as a group. And then there's that last week is when I'll have individual sessions with
sure.
people. So we have a combination of both. The reason I like group is because, sometimes I'll get nervous and I don't even remember that I need to get coached on something else, and somebody else will bring it up. I'm like, oh yeah, I did that same thing. I was thinking about that the other day and I forgot to bring that up, or whatever. And we can learn so much from other people
Exactly.
because the spotlight's on them, and then you can kind of see how their mind is working, and like, oh, well, it's kind of like in a million, I don't know, for me back in high school or whatever, when a girlfriend was dating a guy and you're like, him? Like, can't you see that that's like not a good whatever? Not in a judging way, but like you can see it.
Yeah.
Because when we're in our own heads, we believe our stories.
Exactly.
Exactly. And
Well,
so
you've been wonderful, Caroline. I hope my listeners will follow you. We will continue to follow you as well. Um, you've given me some insight and some things I think that I still want to work on and change. So I want to thank you for that, and just have a wonderful day.
thank you so much. It's a pleasure to meet
Thank
you.
you. Bye-bye
Thank
now.
you. You take care.